They say the most dangerous waters are often the calmest, and at Evergreen Lake, this truth would soon become painfully clear. No one expected that a serene morning would erupt into a confrontation that would reshape an entire lakeside community when an infamous biker gang crossed paths with a retired Special Forces operator. They thought they'd discovered an easy mark in the quiet fisherman. Instead, they encountered a force that would not only challenge their reign of terror. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. But ultimately transform their lives in ways none of them could have foreseen. The early morning mist rolled gently across Evergreen Lake as Alexander Thorne adjusted his fishing line with the practiced precision of a man who'd made similar adjustments in far more hostile environments. At 45, his movements remained fluid, honed by years of Special Forces training and countless dawn missions in places few could find on a map. The fog created a ethereal blanket across the water, broken only by the soft lapping of waves against the weathered dock's wooden pylons. Claire Davidson watched from her lakeside café window as she prepared for the morning rush. She'd run Claire's Landing long enough to know that Alex was always the first to arrive, his quiet presence a constant in their small community. Something felt different this morning, though. There was a tension in his shoulders she hadn't seen before, an alertness that reminded her of the few times he'd mentioned his military service. "Morning, Alex," she called out, carrying a steaming cup of coffee to his usual spot. "You're early, even for you." Alex nodded, his eyes never leaving the water. "Something in the air today, Claire. Can't quite put my finger on it." His voice carried the quiet authority of a man who'd learned to trust his instincts. The peaceful scene shattered as the distant roar of motorcycles echoed across the lake like rolling thunder. Wes Garrison, who'd managed the lake recreation area for 15 years, emerged from his office, his weathered face creased with concern. "That'll be the Iron Wolves," he muttered, moving to stand beside Claire. "They've been terrorizing spots up and down the state, was wondering when they'd find us." Alex remained seated, though Claire noticed his posture shift slightly. Having served 12 years in Delta Force, he'd developed an acute sense for approaching trouble that had never quite left him. The motorcycles grew louder, and soon 7 bikes pulled into the parking area, their chrome gleaming in the morning sun. Derek "Scorpion" Crane, the gang's leader, cut his engine first, surveying the lake area with obvious contempt. His leather jacket bore the Iron Wolves emblem, a snarling metallic wolf with blood-red eyes. "Well, well," Scorpion called out, his voice carrying across the quiet morning. "What do we have here? A little fisherman's paradise." Razor, his massive enforcer, chuckled as he dismounted his bike. "Looks more like a retirement village to me." The few other early morning fishermen began packing their gear, casting nervous glances toward the bikers. Stories about the Iron Wolves had spread through neighboring communities, tales of extortion, violence, and businesses burned to the ground when owners refused to pay for protection. Alex didn't move, remaining focused on his fishing line, though his keen eyes missed nothing. Claire started to approach him, worried, but Wes held her back with a gentle hand on her arm. "Let's see what they want first," Wes whispered, though his hand trembled slightly as he reached for his phone. The Iron Wolves swaggered onto the dock, their heavy boots making the wooden planks creak ominously. The morning mist seemed to part around them as they approached Alex, who continued fishing as if he hadn't noticed their arrival. "Hey, old-timer," Scorpion called out, stopping a few feet from Alex. "This spot looks pretty comfortable. Think it's time you moved along." Alex slowly reeled in his line, his movements unhurried and precise. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of authority that came from years of commanding elite units in the world's most dangerous places. "Plenty of room on the dock," he said calmly, still not looking at Scorpion. "Find your own spot. The bikers exchanged glances, clearly not used to being dismissed so casually. Shadow, the youngest of the group, stepped forward, his face twisted in a sneer. "Maybe you didn't hear the boss right," Shadow said, reaching for Alex's fishing rod. "He said move." In one fluid motion, Alex secured his rod and stood up, his movements belying his age. Standing at full height, he faced Scorpion directly, his calm gaze unwavering. The morning sun had burned away enough mist to reveal a man whose quiet exterior masked a lifetime of combat experience. "And I said find your own spot," Alex repeated, his voice level but firm. "This lake's been here longer than you've been alive, son. It's got rules. Respect them and we won't have any problems." Razor moved to flank Scorpion, cracking his knuckles menacingly. The sound echoed across the quiet water like breaking twigs. "Sounds like someone needs a lesson in respect," he growled, rolling his massive shoulders forward. By now a small crowd had gathered near Claire's café. The morning regulars who'd come for their coffee stood transfixed, watching the scene unfold with a mixture of fear and fascination. Claire felt her heart racing, but noticed something odd: Alex's complete lack of fear. In all the years she'd served him coffee and watched him fish, she'd never seen him so still, so focused. Wes had his phone out, ready to call the authorities, but he too seemed unable to look away from the scene unfolding before them. There was something in the way Alex held himself, a certain readiness that seemed to radiate from his stillness, that made everyone hold their breath. Scorpion stepped closer to Alex, his face inches away. The gang leader's leather jacket creaked as he moved, the snarling wolf emblem catching the morning light. "You've got some nerve, old man. Do you know who we are?" "I know exactly who you are," Alex replied, his voice taking on an edge of steel that hadn't been there before. His eyes, previously calm and measured, now held a look that made even Razor take a small step back. "The question is, do you know who I am?" Before Scorpion could respond, a small fishing boat pulled up to the dock. Brandon Foster, a local teenager who often helped Wes with dock maintenance, watched the scene with wide eyes, his hand frozen on the boat's throttle. In that moment of distraction, the tension seemed to crystallize. Hanging in the air like the last remnants of morning mist, the lake had gone completely still, as if nature itself was holding its breath. Even the usual morning birds had fallen silent, leaving only the gentle lapping of water against the dock to punctuate the standoff. This wasn't just a confrontation anymore. It was a moment that would define Evergreen Lake's future, though none of them knew it yet. Before Scorpion could reply, Captain Olivia Martinez's patrol truck pulled into the parking area, lights off, but moving with purpose. She'd gotten a text from Wes about the situation and approached cautiously, keeping her car between the bikers' motorcycles and the exit. The arrival of law enforcement caused a subtle shift in the bikers' posture, but Scorpion maintained his aggressive stance. Shadow and two other gang members, known only as Fang and Diesel, moved to flank their leader, while keeping a watchful eye on the approaching officer. "Just passing through," Scorpion called out to Martinez, though his eyes never left Alex. "Having a friendly chat with the local wildlife." Captain Martinez stepped out of her vehicle, her movements deliberate and measured. She'd dealt with the Iron Wolves before in neighboring counties, seen the aftermath of their friendly chats in burned-out businesses and hospitalized owners. But something was different here. The usual fear that accompanied their presence was missing, replaced by a strange tension centered around the quiet fisherman who stood unmoved by their intimidation. "Evergreen Lake is a peaceful place," Martinez announced, her hand resting casually near her holster. "Let's keep it that way." Alex remained still, his posture relaxed but ready. Years of operating in hostile territories had taught him to read situations like this, to see the subtle signs of escalation or retreat. He noticed how Shadow kept glancing at the café, how Razor's weight shifted slightly toward his right side, tells that any Special Forces operator would recognize. "Your badge doesn't mean much out here," Scorpion sneered, finally turning to face Martinez. "Lots of accidents can happen around water. Boats sink, people drown. Nature can be unpredictable." The threat hung in the air, but before Martinez could respond, Alex spoke. His voice carried across the dock with quiet authority, the kind that commanded Delta Force teams through operations too classified to mention. "You're right about one thing," he said, drawing everyone's attention back to him. "Nature is unpredictable. So are people, especially people who've spent their lives dealing with threats bigger than leather jackets and loud motorcycles." The subtle shift in Alex's tone made Razor pause. There was something in the way the fisherman held himself, something in his eyes that triggered warning signals, even in the gang's enforcer. Professional soldiers learned to recognize real threats, and right now, every instinct was telling him this was one. Claire watched from her cafe door as more vehicles began arriving. Regular morning customers pulled in, but instead of hurrying away at the sight of the Iron Wolves, they parked and stayed, forming a loose circle around the scene. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. She recognized most of them. Construction workers, teachers, nurses heading home from night shifts, all standing their ground, phones out, recording. "This isn't your territory," Scorpion spat, but his voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. "Not yet." "Territory?" Alex's laugh held no humor. "I've operated in territories you couldn't find on a map, son. Places where threats didn't come with warning labels and nice matching jackets. You want to talk about territory? Fine. But understand one thing. This lake, these people, they're under my protection now." The morning sun had fully risen, burning away the last of the mist. In the clear light, the Iron Wolves' attempt at intimidation seemed somehow smaller, less threatening. Their leather jackets and aggressive postures looked almost theatrical against the backdrop of the peaceful lake, and the quiet strength radiating from the former Special Forces operator. Scorpion took a step back, his face twisted with rage and something else, uncertainty. He'd built his reputation on being the scariest thing in any room, but for the first time, he was facing someone who had seen real terror and emerged stronger. "This isn't over," he snarled, gesturing to his crew. "We'll be back when your audience isn't around." Alex's expression remained unchanged. "No, you won't, because now you know, and knowing is going to eat at you. Every time you think about coming back, you'll remember this moment. Remember that you couldn't intimidate one old fisherman. And you'll wonder what else he might be capable of." The Iron Wolves retreated to their bikes, their departure lacking the swagger of their arrival. As engines roared to life, Captain Martinez moved her patrol car, allowing them to leave, but making sure to photograph each license plate. As the rumble of motorcycles faded into the distance, a collective breath seemed to release around Evergreen Lake. Claire was the first to move, carrying fresh coffee to Alex, who had calmly returned to his fishing spot as if nothing had happened. "You're not just any Special Forces veteran, are you?" she asked, studying him with new eyes as she handed him the steaming cup. Alex took a slow sip before answering. "Delta Force," he said quietly. "Retired 3 years ago. Figured fishing would be a peaceful way to spend my time." A slight smile crossed his face. "Seems trouble has a way of finding me." Captain Martinez approached, her notepad out, but her expression thoughtful. "The Iron Wolves have been causing problems up and down the state. They usually start small, intimidation, vandalism, then escalate to protection rackets and worse, but something tells me they just picked the wrong lake to target." "They'll be back," Wes added, joining them. "Men like that can't handle being stood up to. Their whole operation depends on fear." Alex nodded, checking his line. They'll test us first. Small things. Try to show they're not afraid. He glanced at the gathering of locals who were still lingering, talking amongst themselves about what they'd witnessed. We should be ready. Throughout the morning, word of the confrontation spread through the lakeside community. Brandon Foster, the teenager who'd witnessed everything from his boat, was already sharing the story at the local high school via text messages. By lunchtime, Evergreen Lake had become the talk of the town. Claire noticed an unusual buzz in her café as regulars came in, not just for coffee but for information. Each telling of the story seemed to grow more detailed, more significant. She watched as Alex continued fishing, seemingly oblivious to his new status as the lake's defender. Around noon, Captain Martinez returned with concerning news. "Just got reports from Thompson Creek," she said, pulling up a chair at Alex's spot. "The Iron Wolves spent the morning there, acting more aggressive than usual. They're trying to save face after what happened here." "Wounded pride makes men dangerous," Alex replied, his voice carrying the weight of experience. "They'll want to prove themselves now, show everyone they're not weak." He paused, considering something. "Tell me about their usual patterns, their hangouts." Martinez pulled out a map, marking locations where the Iron Wolves had been active. "They've got a compound here." She pointed to a spot about 20 miles north, old abandoned quarry. "Local jurisdiction's been trying to build a case against them, but witnesses tend to go quiet." As they talked strategy, Wes approached with Brandon Foster and 2 other teenagers in tow. The boys looked nervous but determined. "They want to help," Wes explained. "Brandon here's good with computers, says he can set up security cameras around the lake, and Jamie's father runs the local hardware store, willing to donate supplies to reinforce the dock area." Alex studied the teenagers, seeing something familiar in their eyes, the desire to stand up for their community. It reminded him of younger soldiers he'd trained, teaching them that true strength came from protecting others. "First rule of any operation," Alex said, standing to face them, "we prepare, we train, we don't look for trouble, but we make damn sure we're ready when it finds us." The afternoon brought more volunteers. Local business owners, fishermen, even a group of veterans who'd heard about the morning's events. Each offered what they could: resources, skills, time. Claire watched from her café as Alex organized them with the quiet efficiency of a man who'd led men in far more dangerous situations. "We need eyes on the water," he explained, drawing a rough map of the lake. "Regular patrols, communication networks. They'll try to catch us sleeping, hit when they think we're vulnerable." He turned to Brandon. "Those security cameras, how soon can you have them up?" "Today," Brandon replied eagerly. "My uncle works in security systems. He's willing to help install everything." As the sun began to set, Evergreen Lake had already begun to transform. New lights were being installed along the dock, security cameras discreetly positioned, and a volunteer schedule organized for night watches. But more importantly, something else was changing. The atmosphere of fear that news of the Iron Wolves had brought was being replaced by something stronger: unity. Captain Martinez made one final pass before ending her shift, stopping to watch the activity around the lake. "You know," she said to Alex, "in all my years of law enforcement, I've never seen a community come together this quickly." "People want to stand up to bullies," Alex replied, packing up his fishing gear. "They just need to know they're not standing alone." As darkness settled over the lake, the new lights cast a protective glow over the water. Alex knew the Iron Wolves would be planning their response, trying to reassert their dominance, but as he looked at the transformed lakeside community, he felt a familiar sense of readiness, the same feeling he'd had before countless missions. The enemy might be different, but the principles remained the same: protect, prepare, and stand your ground. The first sign of retaliation came at dawn the next day. Claire arrived to open her café and found the front window shattered, a heavy rock lying amid the broken glass. Wrapped around it was a crude message: "You can't protect everyone." Alex was already at his usual fishing spot when he heard Claire's sharp intake of breath. He was beside her in moments, surveying the damage with the practiced eye of someone who'd seen far worse forms of intimidation. "They used local kids," he said, picking up small details others might miss. The angle of the throw, the footprints in the morning dew, probably paid them to do it, keeping their hands clean while sending a message. Captain Martinez arrived minutes later, her face grim as she photographed the scene. "Got reports of similar incidents at Thompson Creek last month. They used teenagers, making it harder for us to pin anything on the gang directly." Brendan Foster arrived on his bike, skidding to a stop when he saw the broken window. "I know who did it," he said, his voice tight with anger. "Was watching social media all night. Some kids from Riverside Heights were bragging about easy money." Alex studied Brandon's face, seeing the same determination he'd noticed yesterday. "You know these kids?" "Most of them." Brandon nodded. "They're not bad, just lost, like I was before Mr. Garrison gave me a job at the dock." That sparked something in Alex's mind, an idea born from years of not just fighting enemies but turning them into allies. "Get me their names," he said to Brandon, "and spread the word. We're starting a lake patrol program. Training, certificates, maybe even small stipends for those who stick with it." Throughout the morning, more people gathered at Claire's café, helping to clean up the glass and board the window. Someone painted "Still Open, Still Strong" across the plywood, and business actually increased as locals made a point of showing their support. Wes approached Alex with news from his contacts up the lake. "Iron Wolves are gathering reinforcements," he reported quietly, "calling in members from other chapters. They're planning something big." Alex nodded, having expected this. "They have to. We challenge their image. In their world, that requires a show of force." He paused, watching Brandon and his friends setting up security cameras. "But we'll be ready." By midday, Alex's Lake Patrol program was taking shape. Brandon had brought in 5 other teenagers, including 2 who'd been approached by the Iron Wolves with offers of quick cash. Instead of lectures, Alex gave them responsibility, teaching them about surveillance, communication protocols, and the importance of protecting their community. "First rule," he told them, using the same tone he'd once used to train Special Forces candidates. "We're not looking for confrontation. We're here to protect, to observe, and to alert. This isn't about being tough. It's about being smart." Claire watched from her café as Alex worked with the teens, transforming their nervous energy into focused purpose. She noticed how he drew on his military experience without glorifying violence, teaching them that true strength came from standing together. Captain Martinez had stationed an unmarked patrol car near the lake, but more importantly, she'd helped establish a communication network. Every business around the lake now had a direct line to law enforcement, and the teenagers' social media monitoring was already providing valuable intelligence about the Iron Wolves' movements. Late in the afternoon, Shadow, the youngest of the Iron Wolves, was spotted watching the lake from a distance. Unlike yesterday's aggressive display, he seemed more hesitant, studying the changes taking place, the cameras, the patrols, the sense of purpose that had replaced the fear his gang usually inspired. "He's evaluating us," Alex explained to Wes and Claire as they watched Shadow eventually ride away. "Trying to understand why his usual tactics aren't working. That's good. It means they're off balance." As evening approached, Alex gathered everyone involved in the lake's protection for a briefing. The group had grown significantly. Teenagers, business owners, retired veterans who'd heard about the situation, all united under his quiet leadership. "They'll hit us again," he explained, his voice carrying across the assembled group. Harder this time, but remember, their power comes from fear. Every moment we stand together, that power diminishes. Every kid who chooses to protect rather than destroy, every business that stays open, every person who refuses to be intimidated, that's how we win. The sun set over Evergreen Lake, casting long shadows across waters that no longer seemed quite so vulnerable. Alex watched as Brandon and his team conducted their final patrol of the day, moving with newfound confidence and purpose. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but something fundamental had changed. The Iron Wolves had expected to find easy prey at Evergreen Lake. Instead, they'd found a community discovering its own strength, led by a man who'd spent his life turning ordinary people into extraordinary teams. The next few days brought an uneasy calm to Evergreen Lake. Alex used this time to strengthen their defenses, drawing on his years of Special Forces experience to transform the lakeside community into what he privately thought of as a civilian forward operating base. Brandon and his Lake Patrol team had grown to 12 members, each equipped with walkie-talkies and assigned specific observation points. The teenagers, once aimless and easily swayed by quick money, now moved with purpose, proud of their role in protecting their community. "Movement at the north end," Brandon's voice crackled over the radio one morning. "2 Iron Wolves bikes, just watching. Looks like Shadow and someone new." "Good eye," Alex responded, teaching them proper communication protocols. "Keep your distance. Maintain observation. Remember what we discussed about gathering intelligence." Claire had transformed her café into an unofficial command center. Local business owners would gather there each morning, sharing information and coordinating their efforts. The broken window had been replaced, but they'd kept the "still open, still strong" sign as a symbol of defiance. "Got word from my cousin in Thompson Creek," Claire informed Alex as she served him his morning coffee. "Iron Wolves have pulled out of there completely. They're consolidating, gathering their forces." Alex nodded, having anticipated this move. "They're planning something big. Can't let our success here inspire other communities to stand up to them. In their minds, that makes us a priority target." Captain Martinez arrived with more concerning news. "My contacts in state law enforcement say they've spotted at least 30 bikes heading toward the Iron Wolves compound. They're calling in members from 3 different states." "Let them come," Alex replied calmly, checking his fishing line. "The more resources they commit, the more they risk when they fail." Throughout the day, Alex worked with the Lake Patrol, teaching them not just about surveillance, but about reading situations, understanding body language, recognizing potential threats. He drew on his military experience, adapting the training techniques he'd used with Special Forces operators to suit these civilian volunteers. "Notice how Shadow keeps coming back?" he pointed out to Brandon during an afternoon briefing. "He's different from the others, watches more, thinks more. That's important information." Wes had organized the local veterans into an auxiliary support team. These men and women, who'd served in various branches of the military, understood the importance of discipline and organization. They helped maintain a constant presence around the lake, their experience adding another layer of security. "Like old times," one former Army Ranger commented as they discussed patrol routes. "Different battlefield, same principles." As evening approached, Alex gathered his core team, Claire, Wes, Brandon and Captain Martinez, for a strategy session. The café had closed early, its windows reflecting the setting sun as they gathered around a table spread with maps and patrol schedules. "They've been probing our defenses," Alex explained, marking observation points where Iron Wolves members had been spotted. "Learning our patterns, looking for weaknesses, but they're also seeing something they don't understand, a community that's not afraid anymore." Martinez pointed to several locations on the map. "We've got undercover units stationed here, here, and here. State police are finally taking the Iron Wolves' threat seriously, especially after what happened in Thompson Creek. The teenagers who vandalized Claire's café want to join the Lake Patrol, Brandon added. They've seen what we're doing, want to be part of it instead of working for the gang. Alex considered this development. In his years of operations, he'd learned that sometimes the best way to neutralize an enemy was to transform them into allies. Have them come to tomorrow's training session, but they'll have to earn trust, just like everyone else. Claire watched Alex as he outlined patrol assignments for the next day. She'd seen many sides of him now. The quiet fisherman, the skilled tactician, the patient teacher. Each role seemed to flow naturally from his years of service, his experience being put to use in ways he probably never expected. You've given these kids something the Iron Wolves never could, she observed. A real sense of purpose, of belonging. That's what they're really fighting for, Alex replied, his voice carrying the weight of experience. Not territory, not fear, control. But they don't understand that real control comes from earning respect, not demanding it. As night fell over Evergreen Lake, the new security lights cast a protective glow over the water. Brandon's team conducted their final patrol, moving with the confidence of well-trained operators, rather than the uncertain teenagers they'd been just days ago. Alex knew the Iron Wolves were watching, gathering their strength for what they hoped would be a decisive show of force. But as he observed the transformed community around him, he felt the same quiet confidence he'd known before crucial missions. The enemy might have numbers, but they were about to learn that true strength came from something far more powerful than intimidation. The night shift of Lake Patrol took their positions, equipped with night vision equipment donated by local hunting enthusiasts. Alex had taught them how to maintain proper communication intervals and recognize potential threat patterns, skills he'd honed during countless night operations in hostile territories. Remember, he told them during the shift change, complacency kills. Stay alert, stay focused, but most importantly, stay safe. You're our eyes and ears out there. Later that night, Captain Martinez's prediction about the Iron Wolves' growing numbers was confirmed when one of the patrol teams reported seeing a large convoy of bikes moving along the highway toward the abandoned quarry. The riders weren't trying to hide their presence. If anything, they seemed to want their growing numbers to be noticed. Psychological warfare, Alex explained to Claire, as they watched the distant headlights snake through the darkness. They want us to see their strength, to imagine what's coming. In their world, fear is a weapon just as powerful as any physical threat. But the Iron Wolves' attempt at intimidation was having an unexpected effect. Instead of creating fear, their obvious build-up was galvanizing the community. More volunteers were coming forward, offering their skills and resources. A local tech company had even donated sophisticated surveillance equipment, turning Evergreen Lake into a digital fortress. As midnight approached, Alex made one final round of the lake's perimeter. The water was mirror calm, reflecting the security lights like stars fallen to earth. In the distance, he could hear the occasional rumble of motorcycles, a reminder that the real test was still to come. They don't understand what they're really fighting against, he murmured to himself, thinking of all the changes he'd seen in just a few days. The Iron Wolves thought they were facing one man, one community. On the other, a united community, led by a man who'd spent his life learning the true meaning of strength. Scorpion revved his engine, the sound echoing across the water like angry thunder. But before he could act, Shadow broke ranks, riding his bike forward slowly before cutting the engine. The young biker dismounted, removing his helmet as he approached Alex. These people, Shadow gestured to the gathered community. They're not afraid anymore. Not of us, not of you. He turned to face Scorpion. We've already lost here. You just don't see it yet. The tension in the air was palpable as Scorpion processed this betrayal. Other iron wolves shifted uneasily on their bikes, the unity of their show of force beginning to crack. They'd come expecting to crush resistance through overwhelming numbers. Instead, they found themselves in unfamiliar territory, both literally and figuratively. "Traitor!" Scorpion spat, his face contorted with rage. He gunned his engine, the massive bike lurching forward toward Shadow. But Alex was already moving, decades of combat training taking over. In one fluid motion, Alex stepped between them, his hand catching Scorpion's handlebar with precise timing. The bike's front wheel turned sharply, and the gang leader, caught off balance, tumbled to the ground. Before anyone could react, Alex had Scorpion pinned, the movement so quick and efficient it seemed almost casual. "That's one mistake," Alex said quietly, his voice carrying in the sudden silence. "Care to make another?" Razor started to move forward, but Captain Martinez's voice cut through the tension. "Police! Everyone stay where you are!" State police vehicles had blocked both exits to the parking area, their lights flashing in the morning sun. What happened next would be described differently by different witnesses. Some would say it was like watching dominoes fall. One by one, Iron Wolves members began cutting their engines. Others would remember how the morning light seemed to strip away the gang's fearsome appearance, revealing them as what they really were. Men who'd built their power on others' fear. "Your choice," Alex said, still holding Scorpion down with practiced ease. "Each of you has a decision to make right now. This can end with arrests, impounded bikes, and long legal battles. Or," he paused, looking at Shadow, "you can choose something different." Shadow stepped forward again. "He's right. Look around. Really look. They've built something here we never could. Something real. Something lasting. Not through fear, but through standing together." More bikes shut down. A few riders removed their Iron Wolves jackets, letting them fall to the ground. The fearsome gang that had terrorized communities up and down the state was unraveling in the morning light of Evergreen Lake. Captain Martinez approached with handcuffs for Scorpion, who had finally stopped struggling against Alex's hold. "We've got enough evidence to put you away for a long time," she said, "unless you want to reconsider your life choices." Alex stood up, allowing the officers to secure Scorpion. He turned to address the remaining Iron Wolves members. "The Lake Patrol program is open to anyone willing to earn trust, willing to protect rather than intimidate. Your skills, your knowledge of how gangs operate, it could be useful if used for the right purposes." Claire watched from her café as more riders began approaching Alex. She could see the uncertainty in their faces, but also something else. Hope, maybe, or relief. The weight of maintaining their fearsome image, of constantly proving their dominance, seemed to lift from their shoulders. Brandon and his team maintained their positions, but had lowered their cameras. They watched as former enemies began tentatively talking with Alex, with Captain Martinez, with each other. The transformation happening before their eyes was almost impossible to believe. "This is how it ends?" Wes asked quietly, standing beside Claire. "Not with a fight, but with—" "What exactly?" "With a choice," Claire replied, watching as Shadow began helping officers process those who were willing to surrender peacefully. Alex gave them something they didn't even know they needed, a way out. The sun had fully risen now, its light reflecting off chrome and water alike. State police were processing those who'd chosen to turn themselves in, while others spoke with Alex about joining the Lake Patrol program. The fearsome Iron Wolves were dissolving not through force, but through the power of an alternative. Alex returned to his fishing spot, casting his line into the calm water as if it were any other morning. But things had changed fundamentally at Evergreen Lake. The community had not just stood up to intimidation, they'd shown that there was another way, a better path for those willing to take it. Shadow approached Alex's fishing spot, his Iron Wolves jacket conspicuously absent. "Think some of us could learn to fish?" he asked hesitantly. Alex smiled slightly, reeling in his line. "Fishing's just the beginning. Real strength, Real purpose, that's what we're really teaching here. Ready to learn? The morning continued, the crisis dissolving into something unexpected, a new beginning, not just for Evergreen Lake, but for many who had arrived as enemies and found themselves staying as something else entirely. The transformation of Evergreen Lake continued in the weeks following the Iron Wolves confrontation. Alex had established a formal rehabilitation program, turning the Lake Patrol into something far more significant than just security. Former gang members, under his guidance, were learning not just about protecting the community, but about rebuilding their own lives. Shadow, now going by his real name Michael Chen, had become Alex's primary assistant in training new recruits. His intimate knowledge of gang operations proved invaluable in helping others transition away from that life. The young man, who had once been part of the Iron Wolves' intimidation tactics, now spent his mornings teaching teenagers about boat safety and environmental conservation. "It's strange," Michael commented one morning as he helped Alex check the fishing lines. "A month ago, I thought strength meant making people fear you. Now I'm learning it's about something else entirely." Alex nodded, watching as Brandon's team conducted their morning patrol. The Lake Patrol had evolved into a respected youth program, with participants receiving training in everything from water safety to emergency response. "Fear is easy," he replied. "Building something worthwhile, that's the real challenge." Claire's café had become more than just a gathering place. She'd expanded the space to include a small classroom area where Alex and other veterans conducted training sessions. The walls were now adorned with certificates, photos of successful program graduates, and emergency response protocols. 3 more former Iron Wolves asked to join the program today, Claire informed Alex as she brought him his morning coffee. They heard about what happened to Razor. Razor's transformation had been particularly surprising. The former enforcer, after initially resisting change, had discovered a talent for mechanical work. He now ran a legitimate motorcycle repair shop near the lake, employing other former gang members and teaching them the trade. Captain Martinez pulled up in her patrol car, a smile on her face. "State Police just closed the last Iron Wolves case," she announced. "The gang's officially disbanded. Other communities are asking about your rehabilitation program. They want to implement something similar." Alex watched as a group of teenagers, a mix of former troublemakers and Lake Patrol veterans, practiced emergency response drills under Michael's supervision. "It's not just about rehabilitation," he explained. "It's about giving people a chance to be part of something meaningful." The morning's activities were interrupted by the arrival of several boats carrying families for a fishing lesson. What had started as Alex's solitary morning routine had grown into a popular community program. Former gang members now worked alongside long-time residents, teaching children about water safety and responsible fishing practices. "Remember when we thought we'd have to fight them off?" Wes asked, joining Alex at his usual spot. "Never imagined it would turn out like this." Alex smiled slightly, remembering the tension of those early confrontations. "Sometimes the best victories come from battles you don't have to fight." These men weren't looking for violence. They were looking for purpose. They just didn't know how to find it. Throughout the day, more evidence of the lake's transformation was visible. The security cameras remained, but they were now part of a broader safety system. The radio network that had once coordinated defense against the Iron Wolves now helped manage fishing tournaments and water safety programs. Brandon approached with news from his latest patrol. "Got word from some of the other lakes," he reported. "They're starting their own programs. Michael's been helping them set up training protocols." The afternoon brought a special ceremony at Claire's café. 3 more program participants were receiving their certification in water safety and emergency response. Among them was a former Iron Wolves member who had once participated in vandalizing the very building where he now stood, proudly accepting his certificate. The hardest part, Michael addressed the gathering, his voice carrying the weight of experience, isn't leaving the old life behind. It's believing you deserve a chance at a new one. But thanks to this program, thanks to Alex and this community, we're learning that everyone deserves that chance. Alex watched the proceedings with quiet satisfaction. In his years with Special Forces, he'd learned that true strength often came in unexpected forms. The transformation of Evergreen Lake wasn't just about defeating an enemy, it was about creating something new, something lasting. "You've built something remarkable here," Captain Martinez observed, watching as former adversaries worked together, teaching and learning, building and growing. "Something that goes way beyond just keeping the peace." "They built it," Alex corrected her, gesturing to the diverse group of people around them. All they needed was someone to show them it was possible. As evening approached, the lake took on a different kind of peace than it had known before. The security lights still illuminated the water, but now they shone on families fishing together, on teenagers learning valuable skills, on men and women finding new purpose in protecting rather than intimidating. The sun set over Evergreen Lake, casting long shadows across waters that had seen remarkable changes. What had started as one man's stand against intimidation had grown into something far more powerful, a model of transformation that was spreading far beyond the lake's shores, touching lives in ways none of them could have imagined. 6 months after the Iron Wolves' disbandment, Evergreen Lake had become a model for community rehabilitation programs across the state. One morning, as Alex prepared for his usual fishing routine, he received unexpected visitors. 3 state lawmakers, accompanied by Captain Martinez, had come to observe the program that was making headlines. "It's remarkable," Senator Thompson commented, watching as Michael led a group of former gang members through their morning patrol briefing. "When we first heard about a Special Forces veteran turning gang members into community leaders, it seemed almost unbelievable." Alex continued rigging his fishing line, his movements precise and unhurried. "Nothing unbelievable about it. People want purpose, want to belong to something meaningful. We just gave them that opportunity." The transformation was evident everywhere. Claire's Café had expanded, adding a community center where former gang members could take classes in everything from business management to conflict resolution. The Lake Patrol program had become a certified training facility, issuing recognized qualifications in water safety and emergency response. "Tell me about the recidivism rates," another lawmaker asked, taking notes as they walked the dock. "How many of your graduates have returned to gang life?" "0, Captain Martinez answered proudly. "In 6 months, we haven't had a single program graduate return to criminal activity. More importantly, they're actively preventing others from joining gangs." Brandon, now the lead instructor for the youth program, approached with his latest group of trainees. Among them were teenagers who had once been prime recruitment targets for gangs. Now they wore Lake Patrol uniforms with pride, their backs straight, their eyes clear with purpose. "The key," Alex explained, watching the training session, "was never about fighting gangs. It was about offering a better alternative. These kids, these men, they were looking for structure, for respect, for a sense of belonging. We just showed them a better way to find it." Michael had proven particularly effective at reaching out to other gangs. His experiences with the Iron Wolves, combined with the transformation he'd undergone, made him a powerful advocate for change. He'd recently returned from a speaking tour of troubled communities, sharing his story and the message of hope it carried. "The hardware store hired 2 more program graduates last week," Claire reported, bringing coffee to the gathering. "And Razor's motorcycle shop is doing so well he's opening a 2nd location. He's specifically hiring former gang members, giving them a trade and a fresh start." The lawmakers watched as a group of former Iron Wolves members, now certified instructors, conducted a water safety demonstration for local school children. The men who had once terrorized communities were now protecting them, their knowledge of intimidation tactics transformed into skills for preventing bullying and violence. "What's next for the program?" Senator Thompson asked, clearly impressed by what she was seeing. "There's talk of implementing this model statewide." Alex finally looked up from his fishing spot, his eyes scanning the transformed lake community. Expansion needs to be careful, organic. This works because it's real, because we take the time to understand each person who comes through. Try to scale too quickly, make it too bureaucratic, and you'll lose what makes it effective. Throughout the morning, more evidence of the program's success arrived. A group of law enforcement officers from another state had come to study the model. Former gang members from various organizations, hearing about the program's success, sought admission. Each was evaluated carefully, given the same opportunity to prove their commitment to change. "The most powerful aspect," Captain Martinez explained to the visitors, "is how it spreads naturally. Our graduates go back to their communities, start similar programs, help others find the same path. It's like watching ripples spread across water." Alex stood to demonstrate a casting technique to a new group of students. Among them was a former gang leader from a neighboring county, his attention focused intently on learning this new skill. The transformation from intimidator to student was remarkable to witness. "You know what amazes me most?" Claire said quietly to the lawmakers. "It's not just that these men have changed, it's how they're helping others change. Every success story becomes a beacon of hope for someone else." The afternoon brought more visitors, journalists, social workers, law enforcement officials from other jurisdictions. All came to understand how a former Special Forces operator had turned a confrontation with a biker gang into a model for community transformation. "The principles are simple," Alex explained to the gathered observers. "Respect, responsibility, purpose. The same things I learned in Special Forces, just applied differently. We're not trying to break people down, we're showing them how to build themselves up." As the sun began its descent, casting golden light across the lake, the day's visitors departed with notebooks full of observations and minds full of possibilities. But for Alex and the Evergreen Lake community, it was just another day of quiet transformation, of lives being rebuilt one lesson at a time. "They don't really understand, do they?" Michael asked, joining Alex at his fishing spot. "They see the programs, the statistics, but they miss the real change." Alex nodded, watching the evening patrol take their positions. "Real change happens in moments like these," he replied, "in choices made, in trust earned, in lives rebuilt. Everything else is just details." A year after the confrontation that transformed Evergreen Lake, the community gathered for a special celebration. What had started as a stand against intimidation had evolved into something far more significant, a nationally recognized model for community rehabilitation and gang prevention. Alex stood at his usual fishing spot, watching as boats decorated with banners and streamers gathered on the water. The Lake Patrol, now a certified training organization, had graduated its 100th member. More significantly, the program had been replicated in 12 other communities across 3 states. "Hard to believe it all started with a few bikers picking the wrong fisherman to intimidate," Claire commented, joining him with his morning coffee. The café, now expanded into a full community center, was bustling with activity as people gathered for the celebration. Michael, who had become the program's lead outreach coordinator, approached with a group of visitors from another state's law enforcement agency. "They want to know the secret," he said, gesturing to the officials. "I told them there isn't one, just trust, time, and someone willing to see past the surface." The morning's festivities began with a demonstration by the Lake Patrol's newest graduates. Brandon, now head of training, led his team through a complex water rescue scenario. Among the participants were former gang members from 3 different organizations, all working seamlessly together. "Remember when we thought we'd have to fight to protect this place?" Captain Martinez asked, watching the demonstration. "Now we're having trouble keeping up with all the applications for the program." Alex nodded, observing how his simple defensive strategy had evolved into something far more powerful. The security cameras installed during the crisis now served as training tools. The communication network, originally designed for protection, had become a model for community coordination. "Latest statistics just came in," Wes reported, joining the group. "Gang activity in the region is down 60%. Other communities using our model are reporting similar results. It's not just about rehabilitation anymore. We're preventing recruitment, giving kids alternatives before they ever consider joining gangs." Throughout the day, success stories emerged in conversations around the lake. Razor's motorcycle shop had expanded into a certified technical school, providing job training for at-risk youth. Former Iron Wolves members had become mentors, counselors, and small business owners. "Tell them about the national recognition," Claire urged Alex, but he just smiled and continued fishing. The Presidential Medal for Community Service sitting in his tackle box meant less to him than the daily transformations he witnessed. A flotilla of boats began the celebration's main event, a water parade showcasing the program's achievements. Each vessel represented a different aspect of the community's transformation. Leading them was Shadow's boat, carrying graduates from the first Lake Patrol class. "You know what the real victory is?" Alex finally spoke, watching the parade. "It's not in the numbers or the awards. It's in moments like that." He pointed to where a former gang enforcer was teaching a group of children about boat safety, his face lit with genuine joy. The afternoon brought more revelations of the program's impact. A group of former gang members from a neighboring state shared their stories of transformation. Business owners reported increased community engagement and decreased vandalism. Families spoke of renewed hope for their children's futures. "The governor wants to implement the program statewide," Captain Martinez informed Alex. "They're talking about creating a special task force, with you as the lead consultant." Alex continued watching the water, his expression thoughtful. "Programs don't change lives," he replied. "People change lives. Any expansion needs to maintain that personal connection, that individual investment in each person's success." As evening approached, the celebration moved to Claire's café. The walls, once boarded up after gang vandalism, now displayed hundreds of photos, each telling a story of transformation. Graduation certificates hung alongside newspaper articles about the program's success. Brandon gathered his Lake Patrol team for a special presentation. "A year ago, we thought we were learning to protect a lake," he addressed the crowd. "Instead, we learned to protect each other, to build something worth protecting." The sun began to set over Evergreen Lake, casting warm light across waters that had seen remarkable changes. Boats still dotted the lake, but now they carried families, students, and graduates of a program that had redefined community rehabilitation. "One thing still bothers me," Michael said, joining Alex at his spot. "Why fishing? Of all the ways to reach people, why did you choose this?" Alex cast his line into the golden water, his movements as precise as ever. "Fishing teaches patience, observation, respect for something bigger than yourself. In Special Forces, we learned that the most important battles are won in the mind, in the heart. Out here, on this water, people find their own way to those victories." The celebration continued into the evening, but Alex remained at his spot, fishing as the stars began to appear. He thought about all the lives touched, all the transformations witnessed, All the battles won not through force, but through understanding and opportunity. "You've created something extraordinary here," Claire said, bringing him a final cup of coffee for the day. "Something that will outlast all of us." "No," Alex corrected her, watching the lights reflect off the peaceful water. "We all created this. I just showed them where to start." The ripple effects of Evergreen Lake's transformation continued to spread in unexpected ways. One morning, Alex arrived at his usual fishing spot to find a familiar face waiting. Scorpion, recently released from prison after serving his sentence. The former gang leader looked different, the aggressive swagger replaced by something more contemplative. "Heard about what you've built here," Scorpion, now going by his real name David Miller, said quietly. "Thought I wouldn't believe it until I saw it myself." Alex continued setting up his fishing gear, his movements unhurried. "Here to cause trouble or here to learn?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Neither. Both. I don't know," David admitted, watching as the lake patrol began their morning rounds. "Inside, I had a lot of time to think. Watched my whole organization fall apart, transform into something I barely recognize." Michael approached cautiously, remembering his former leader, but instead of tension, there was a strange sense of completion in their meeting. "We saved you a spot in the program," he said, surprising both David and Alex. "Always knew you'd come eventually." Throughout the morning, David observed the changes at Evergreen Lake. He watched former Iron Wolves members teaching water safety to children, saw rehabilitated gang members working legitimate jobs, witnessed the respect they'd earned through protection rather than intimidation. "Your empire didn't fall apart," Alex explained as they walked the dock. "It evolved into something stronger. These men haven't lost their brotherhood. They've redefined it." Captain Martinez arrived, initially tense at seeing the former gang leader, but Alex's calm demeanor and David's obvious transformation made her reconsider. "Your old compound," she informed them. "It's being converted into a training center for the expanded program." Claire brought coffee to the group, treating David with the same warmth she showed everyone. "The past stays in the past," she said, noting his surprise. "What matters is what you choose to do now." As the day progressed, more former Iron Wolves members recognized their old leader. Instead of fear or anger, there was a sense of hope. If Scorpion himself could consider change, it validated their own transformations. "Show me," David finally said to Alex. "Show me how this works, not just the surface, but the real change. How do you take men like us and turn them into this?" Alex led him through the program's various components, the training sessions, counseling programs, job skills development. But more importantly, he showed him the intangible changes, the pride in Brandon's eyes as he led his team, the confidence in reformed members' postures, the genuine community that had formed. "It starts with a choice," Alex explained, demonstrating a casting technique. "Every person who comes here has to make that same decision, to trust, to learn, to change. We don't force it, we just provide the opportunity." Throughout the afternoon, David spoke with program graduates, hearing their stories firsthand. Each narrative echoed his own journey. The realization that true strength came from building up rather than tearing down. "The hardest part," Michael shared with his former leader, "is accepting that everything we thought we knew about power was wrong. Real power isn't in making people fear you, it's in helping them become stronger." As evening approached, David watched a graduation ceremony for the newest Lake Patrol members. Among them were former rivals from different gangs, now working together to protect the community they'd once terrorized. "We've got room for one more," Alex said quietly, standing beside the former gang leader. "But it has to be your choice. No one can make it for you." The sun began to set over Evergreen Lake, casting long shadows across waters that had seen so many transformations. David stood at the end of the dock, looking out over the community he'd once tried to control through fear. "I spent 20 years building something I thought was about power," he finally said. "You spent 1 year showing everyone, including me, what real power looks like." Claire approached with registration forms for the program. "Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is admit you need to change," she offered, holding out the papers. David took them, his hands slightly trembling. "The men who followed me, I led them down the wrong path. Maybe it's time I helped lead them back." Alex watched as the former gang leader began filling out the forms. Another transformation was beginning at Evergreen Lake, perhaps the most significant yet. The man who had once embodied everything they fought against was choosing to become part of what they'd built. "Tomorrow morning, 5 a.m., Alex said simply. "Bring your patience. Fishing's just the beginning." As darkness fell over the lake, the security lights reflected off water that had seen countless stories of redemption. David Miller, once known as Scorpion, leader of the Iron Wolves, took his first step toward becoming part of that legacy. "You know," Michael said to Alex as they watched David leave, "with him on board, there's no gang member who can say change isn't possible." Alex nodded, reeling in his line for the day. Sometimes the greatest victories come from the most unexpected surrenders. David's integration into the Evergreen Lake program brought unexpected challenges and opportunities. His reputation preceded him, drawing both former gang members seeking change and skeptics watching for any sign of faltering. Alex observed it all with his characteristic calm, understanding that this transformation could be their most significant success or their most visible failure. "Never thought I'd see this," Captain Martinez commented one morning, watching as David helped Michael conduct orientation for new program participants. "The man we spent years trying to arrest is now helping prevent others from following his old path." Alex continued rigging his fishing line, but his attention was on the subtle dynamics playing out on the dock. Sometimes the best teachers are the ones who've made the biggest mistakes. They understand the cost of wrong choices. The morning's activities showcased how far the program had evolved. Brandon led advanced water rescue training, while former gang members conducted community outreach sessions. Claire's café had become a hub for both program activities and informal counseling, with David often sharing his experiences with those struggling to change. "It's different when you're the one who built the walls," David explained to a group of former gang members. "You have to tear down your own creation, admit that what you thought was strength was actually weakness. That's harder than any prison sentence." Throughout the day, evidence of the program's expanding influence continued to arrive. Representatives from 3 more counties came to study their model. Former gang members from as far as 2 states away sought admission. The transformation that had started with one confrontation at Evergreen Lake was becoming a movement. "Tell them about the national recognition," Claire urged Alex, as another news crew set up for interviews. But Alex just smiled and continued his fishing, letting others handle the publicity. His focus remained on the individual transformations happening around him. "The governor's office called again," Captain Martinez reported. "They want to make this a statewide initiative. With David's involvement, they think we could reach even more gangs, prevent more violence." Alex watched as David worked with a young former gang member, teaching him the basics of fishing. The patience in his instruction, the genuine interest in the young man's progress, these were things that couldn't be programmed or mandated. "Programs don't change lives," Alex repeated his familiar mantra. "People change lives. Any expansion has to maintain that personal connection." The afternoon brought a significant moment. A rival gang that had moved into the Iron Wolves' old territory sent representatives to observe the program. They found their former nemesis, Scorpion himself, teaching conflict resolution and community engagement. Your reputation got them here, Alex told David during a break, but it's your transformation that will convince them to stay. David nodded, understanding the weight of his role. All those years I thought I was building something powerful. Now I realize I was just creating more broken people. This is real power. As evening approached, the Lake Patrol conducted their regular drills. Among them were former members of 5 different gangs, working seamlessly together. The sight would have been unthinkable a year ago, but now it seemed natural, inevitable. "You know what the hardest part is?" David asked Alex as they watched the drills. "Facing the people I hurt. Not just rivals or victims, but my own men. I led them down a dark path, convinced them it was the only way." Alex cast his line into the darkening water. Leadership isn't about never making mistakes. It's about having the courage to admit them and work to make things right. The sun began to set over Evergreen Lake, casting long shadows across waters that had seen so many transformations. Brandon's team completed their patrols, while Claire's Café hosted an evening support group for program participants. "Sometimes I wonder," David mused, watching the activity around the lake, "if we had met differently that first day, would all this still have happened?" Alex considered this as he reeled in his line. Change was always possible. You just needed to see it was worth the risk. As night fell, the security lights illuminated a scene that would have seemed impossible 18 months ago. Former gang members patrolled alongside community volunteers. Rehabilitation programs operated at full capacity, and at the center of it all, a former gang leader worked to rebuild what he had once tried to destroy. "Tomorrow's another challenge," Alex said as they packed up for the day. "Another chance to prove that change is possible." David looked out over the peaceful water, remembering the man he'd been when he first arrived at Evergreen Lake. "You know what I've learned? The hardest gang to leave is the one in your own mind, the one that keeps telling you you can't change." The evening ended with another successful graduation ceremony. As Alex watched David congratulate the newest program graduates, he reflected on how far they'd all come. The lake that had once been a battleground had become a sanctuary, a place of transformation and hope. "You've built something remarkable," Claire said, joining Alex at his spot. "We all did," Alex corrected her, watching the lights reflect off the calm water. "Every person who chose to change, every member who helped another find their way, they're the ones who built this. I just showed them it was possible." 2 years after the initial confrontation at Evergreen Lake, the transformation had become a recognized model for community rehabilitation. The morning began as usual, with Alex at his fishing spot, but today was different. A national task force on gang prevention had arrived to study what they called the Evergreen Miracle. "It's not a miracle," Alex explained to the assembled officials. "It's about understanding that people want purpose, respect, and community. We just show them a better way to find those things." David, now the program's outreach director, led the task force through their morning briefing. The former gang leader had become one of their most effective advocates, his personal transformation lending credibility to their message. Among them were former gang members who had once prowled these same waters with very different intentions. Now they served as guardians, their past experiences helping them spot and prevent potential troubles before they could develop. "You know what amazes me most?" Claire asked, watching the patrol boats head out. "It's not just that these men have changed, it's how they're changing others. Every success story becomes a catalyst for someone else's transformation." Alex nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. The program had created a cascade effect, each reformed member becoming a bridge to others still trapped in the cycle of violence and fear. The task force had tried to quantify this phenomenon in their reports, But the real impact was visible in the quiet moments of connection happening around the lake every day. "We're not just changing individuals," David observed, his voice carrying the weight of his own journey. "We're changing the very definition of strength in these communities. That's something no government program alone could achieve." As the last light faded from the sky, Alex took one final look at the peaceful waters of Evergreen Lake. What had begun as a confrontation had evolved into something far more powerful, a testament to the human capacity for change, and a reminder that sometimes the greatest victories come not from defeating enemies, but from transforming them into allies. The third anniversary of Evergreen Lake's transformation brought an unexpected reunion. Former Iron Wolves members from across the country gathered not for confrontation, but for celebration. The lake that had once been their target had become a symbol of redemption, drawing those seeking their own path to change. Alex arrived at his usual fishing spot to find dozens of motorcycles parked in neat rows, a far cry from that first intimidating arrival. These bikes now belonged to program graduates, successful business owners, and community leaders who had once been part of the gang life. 3 years ago, we came here looking for easy prey, David addressed the gathering, standing beside Alex. Instead, we found something we didn't even know we were looking for, a chance to become better men. The morning's activities showcased how far they'd come. Former gang members now led training sessions, teaching everything from water safety to business management. The Lake Patrol, under Brandon's leadership, had become a certified emergency response unit, working alongside local law enforcement. "Remember when we thought strength meant making people fear us?" Michael asked the assembled group. "Now we know it means having the courage to help others overcome their fears." Throughout the day, success stories emerged from unexpected quarters. Razor's Motorcycle Repair School had expanded to 5 locations, each staffed by program graduates. Former enemies had become business partners, mentors, and friends. Claire's Café, now a full-fledged community center, buzzed with activity as graduates shared their journeys. Some had started their own rehabilitation programs in other communities, spreading the model that had transformed their lives. "The ripple effect continues," Captain Martinez reported, joining Alex at his spot. "We're seeing similar programs starting up in 3 more states. Your quiet stand against intimidation has become a movement." Alex watched as David conducted a fishing lesson for a group of teenagers, sons and daughters of former gang members who now had different role models to follow. The generational impact of their work was becoming evident. "It's not just about changing lives anymore," David explained to a visiting journalist. "It's about changing legacies, breaking cycles that have trapped families for generations." The afternoon brought more revelations of the program's impact. A study by a major university had documented the economic benefits of their rehabilitation model. Communities that had adopted their approach reported significant decreases in gang activity and corresponding increases in small business growth. "Tell them about the international interest," Claire urged, but Alex remained focused on his fishing, letting others handle the publicity. His attention was on the individual transformations still happening around him. "You know what's remarkable?" Brandon observed, watching new participants learn the basics of the Lake Patrol. "We're not just preventing violence, we're creating leaders. Men who once destroyed communities are now building them." As evening approached, the gathering took on a more reflective tone. Veterans of the program shared their stories, each narrative adding to the tapestry of transformation that had begun with one confrontation on a quiet morning. "I used to think power came from controlling others," a former gang leader from another state admitted. "Now I understand it comes from helping others control themselves." "David, now a nationally recognized speaker on gang intervention, shared his perspective. We thought we were building an empire through fear. Instead, we learned to build something far more powerful through trust and understanding. As evening approached, the celebration took on a deeper meaning. Graduates from every year of the program had returned, each bringing stories of continued transformation and growth. The ripple effect of their work had touched countless lives. "You know what amazes me most?" Claire asked, bringing Alex his evening coffee. "It's not just that these men changed. It's how they're changing the world, one community at a time." The sun began to set over Evergreen Lake, casting golden light across waters that held 5 years of stories. Each wave seemed to whisper tales of redemption, of lives rebuilt, of hope restored. 5 years, David mused, standing beside Alex at his fishing spot. "Did you ever imagine it would grow into this?" Alex cast his line into the peaceful water. Every person has the capacity for change. Sometimes they just need someone to show them it's possible. The security lights came on, illuminating a scene that would have seemed impossible 5 years ago. Former gang members chatted with law enforcement officers. Once rival groups worked together to mentor new participants. Children played safely on docks that had once been territories to defend. "The real legacy isn't in the programs or the awards," Alex explained to a visiting dignitary. "It's in the daily choices people make to become better than they were yesterday." As night fell, the celebration continued around them. The lake that had once been a battleground had become a beacon of hope, a testament to the power of transformation and the strength found in unity. "Tomorrow's another day," Alex said, packing up his gear. "Another chance to help someone find their way home." The waters of Evergreen Lake reflected the evening lights like stars fallen to earth, each gleam a reminder of the lives touched, the changes made, the hope restored. What had begun with one man's quiet strength had become a symphony of transformation, playing out across communities nationwide. David's final words echoed across the peaceful water. "You taught us that real strength isn't in making people fear you, it's in helping them discover their own strength. That's a lesson that will echo through generations." As the celebration wound down, Alex remained at his spot, watching the calm waters that had seen so much change. The lake had become more than a place. It was a symbol of the transformative power of understanding, patience, and unwavering hope. 5 years, he murmured to himself, and we're just getting started. The security lights cast their protective glow over Evergreen Lake, illuminating not just water and docks, but the endless possibilities that arise when people choose to change, to grow, to believe in something better than fear and intimidation. And somewhere in the distance, another community was beginning its own journey of transformation, inspired by the story of a Special Forces veteran who had shown that the greatest victories come not from defeating enemies, but from helping them find their way home. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.